Ladies and gentlemen, President Trump has just made a very serious and very deadly promise, and so as things currently stand, things are not looking good for Venezuelan president, really a dictator, Nicolas Maduro. Now, as you all know, President Trump has recently deployed 7 different naval warships, a nuclear submarine, and over 4,000 U.S. military personnel off of the coast of Venezuela. And as I'm sure you all recently saw, they even blew up one of Maduro's drug smuggling boats. And so really, President Trump has been sending a very strong message as of late. The drug smuggling is going to stop, the narco-terrorism is going to stop, and if you don't comply, we're just going to blow you up. Now, of course, Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro isn't so happy about this. In fact, in response to having his drug smuggling boat blown up, Nicolas Maduro decided that it would be a good idea to fly some of his fighter jets right over the top of some of our U.S. naval vessels that are parked off of the Venezuelan coast. However, as it would turn out, that was not a good idea. And the reason why is because just earlier today, we got the news that now President Trump is considering launching direct targeted strikes right on the Venezuelan mainland, aimed at taking out key narco-terrorist infrastructure. But now, as all of this has been unfolding over the last couple of days, you just know that the far-left progressives and all of the globalists are actually defending Maduro and condemning President Trump's decisive action against Maduro's narco-terrorism. In fact, the United Nations, the UN, even came out recently and tried to make the argument that Maduro isn't even involved in drug trafficking at all. However, Secretary of State Marco Rubio isn't having it. Take a look.
I don't care what the UN says. The UN doesn't know what they're talking about. Maduro is indicted by a grand jury in the Southern District of New York. That means the Southern District of New York presented the evidence to a grand jury, and a grand jury indicted him. And then a superseding indictment came out that was unsealed about a year and a half ago that specifically detailed Maduro's actions. So number one, let there be no doubt, Nicolas Maduro is an indicted drug trafficker in the United States, and he's a fugitive of American justice.
And so, folks, as you can clearly see, with regards to Nicolas Maduro, the Trump administration is done playing games. Too many American lives have been lost, and too much damage has been caused. And by the way, whatever happens next really does fall on Maduro's shoulders. Let's be honest here for a moment. There are approximately 10 different countries throughout Latin America that are hostile to the United States of America in various ways, but President Trump is not looking to go after all of them. The reason why he's focused on Venezuela and Maduro specifically is because Maduro and his regime are directly involved in narco-terrorism in a very direct and hands-on way. So that is why all of this is currently happening. But also, take a look at this. For all of his narco-terrorism related crimes, the Trump administration has recently placed a massive $50 million bounty on Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. And perhaps the best part is, Maduro's bounty isn't even being paid for by all of us U.S. taxpayers. No, instead, it's being paid for by Maduro's own seized assets. So really, he's paying for his own capture and arrest. And as a real quick comparison here, back in the day, the architect of 9/11, Osama bin Laden, only ever had a $25 million bounty. So that's how you know that the Trump administration is taking this entire situation with Maduro incredibly seriously. But now, folks, Stephen Miller actually gave a perfect breakdown of this entire situation with Venezuela and Nicolas Maduro just earlier this morning that I want you all to take a look at. But first, I do want to say real quick that if you folks enjoy the daily news updates, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. But okay, check this out.
Nicolas Maduro is an indicted drug trafficker. He's indicted in federal court. He's a fugitive from justice in America. As I think you're also aware, there's a $50 million reward for the return of Nicolas Maduro. Not just him, his henchmen have also been indicted. So it is a drug cartel that is running Venezuela. This is a very important point. It's not a government, it is a drug cartel, a narco-trafficking organization that is running Venezuela. And this has been documented in federal court, and indictments have been secured. The people of Venezuela have been suffering and struggling under the reality of a nation that is so rich in resources, so rich in reserves, that is run by Maduro, the head of the cartel that you referenced, the Cartel de los Sols. That is absolutely one of the most ruthless criminal cartels on the planet. And many Americans may not realize that the drugs killing their kids are coming from Maduro, and also the criminal aliens killing their kids are coming from Maduro. So he's sending his drugs, he is sending his killers, his assassins into our communities, and he's working directly with other designated foreign terrorist organizations like the FARC in Colombia and all the Mexican drug cartels. So it's one continuous loop. And for decades and for years, for generations, we used our military to engage in action against terrorists in the Middle East and in Africa, while leaving unharmed the terrorists in our own hemisphere who are responsible for so much more American deaths, so many more American deaths, who have spilled so much blood across the Western Hemisphere, who have bereaved so many parents and families, and who have contributed to such a horrific cycle and just nonstop, relentless surge of violence in our cities. Every major city in America is suffering from cartel violence. Even the U.S.-based gangs are working directly with these cartels. The drugs, the guns, the weapons, the cash, the organization. We've been occupied by cartels for far too long. President Trump is finally allowing and directing the United States military to use its authorities under the Constitution to defend America from the terrorist organizations that have run free for too long in our own hemisphere. Thank you all. Thank you for the question.
And so, folks, let's go ahead and break all of that down. If we end up using the U.S. military to crack down on all of the Latin American narco-terrorism gangs and cartels that have been actively killing hundreds of thousands of Americans every single year, between you and me, it would quite frankly be the most justified use of our military that we've seen in decades. The reality is, Maduro is probably the Western Hemisphere's single most pressing national security threat, and he's already responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Americans. And so you know what, folks, to be honest, I'm with President Trump on this one. If we don't use our military to neutralize threats that are effectively right in our own backyard and that are already responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of young Americans, then what's the point of having a military at all? And like I said earlier, as far as I'm concerned, shutting down all of this Latin American narco-terrorism would probably be the most justified use of our military that we've seen in decades. Finally, we actually have a president back in the White House who's no longer turning a blind eye to terrorist regimes like Maduro's, who's hell-bent on killing as many Americans as possible and profiteering off of the entire process. And so, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue to watch this entire situation unfold day by day, I keep thinking to myself, yes, this is exactly what I voted for.